distinguished guests, Mrs. Kogie Chinnappan, Mrs. Indira Ramkhelawan, Dr. Chaitanya Prakash Yogi, Director of the Swami Vivekanandan Cultural Center at the Consulate General of India, Durban, Mr. Simpiwe Umchunu, Mr. Piyush Khandelwal, and our wonderful online viewers. Namaste, Vanakkam, and welcome to our 20th episode of Bharat Ek Anubhuti, India, a Feeling. This is an online travelogue series whereby our guests will take us through their journey in India. Our first guest and speaker is a retired educator. She has a passion for teaching children and seeing them grow. She has led by example and continues to do so in her daily activities. Please welcome Mrs. Kogie Chinnappan to take us through her journey in India. Mrs. Chinnappan, over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Vanakkam, Namaste, Namaskaram. My humble greetings to the Director of the Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center at the Consulate General of India, Durban, respected Dr. Prakash Yogi ji, Mr. Simpiwe and the coordinator. Thank you for affording me this opportunity to share with you my feelings and travel experiences to India. My first trip was in the 80s. Upon arrival at the then Bombay, now Mumbai airport, there was a familiar feeling in a known place, yet it was my first trip to India. My husband was studying in Chennai, and it was 3 months since I had seen him. Tamil Nadu, Chennai had a fragrance of belonging. I felt at home. My destination was Chidambaram, and I traveled by bus from Mumbai to Chidambaram, a road trip of a lifetime that highlighted so many different experiences. The one that stands out was a stop at a waterfalls that almost felt like a cleansing bath before reaching the Annamalai University, where my husband was studying for his MA in Tamil literature. Traveling by various modes of transport gave me a unique view of my daily roots, bringing me back to my roots and enjoying traveling with the train, bus, and also using the auto, and not forgetting the Ossen cart, which I really enjoyed. This was exciting, learning how to throw a hand towel to reserve my seat for a train trip, which was unreserved. My journey was very, very interesting from the Chidambaram area. My journey inward and understanding of my existence as a spiritual being began in Chidambaram. Here, I was able to go to the library, the university itself, where my husband was studying. What really brought out a feeling of respect that was beyond words was when students had to stand up and greet their lecturers in a level of the MA degree. And this for me was something that I could feel so emotional to date. That bond between a lecturer and a student, yet having that respect. My spiritual pilgrimage was varied with my daughter and my husband. Both my husband and daughter studied periodically in Chennai, and this gave me time to explore the city. And I was able to visit various educational institutes where I was able, the one that stands out is the primary school, and most of these primary schools were schools of English medium. So I was fortunate that I was able to interact with students from these schools. And what brought out many good feelings and my childhood memory was playing games like Daya, it's a dice game, and also playing whoop and netball with the children. And what stood out was reading a program where I sat with them and I did a reading program. Whenever I went for short periods, I was able to go to a school in Sidambaram and do reading programs with children. And I actually assisted them in creating a love for reading. During my visits to India, it was most memorable time was going to the museums and the library. I had this thirst for museums and library because at that time I worked at the documentation center at the University of Durban, Westville, and that irked my thirst to find out more about the history of the Indians. And with the library set up at during that period was so well organized, and it left the library that I was working very wanting. So I was able to speak to librarians and the museum curators, and we interacted and was able to get lots of work done. My knowledge for the museum and artifacts stemmed from both the South Museum and the North Museum, so much so that I was able to set up as recent as 2016 the artifacts room at the 1860 Heritage Center. And in all this, I was able also to go into library through my visits to India, and to date, I still keep in contact. But my spiritual and my social being stemmed from my visits to India. And my my thirst or my joy for spiritual awareness and music stemmed from my various visits. And every time I went, there was a different experience. And during the Margaji season, there's music concerts and dance festivals together with drama, which allowed me to expose my daughter to the culture and also to develop and take as much cultural heritage from the soil of India. The food goes hand in hand. In the South, I just love my South Indian thali, and through that is the sambar, the idli, the masala dosas, and also in the North, I just love the North food and the ambience and engaging with the people from India through my visits and to conferences. The Tamil conferences emerged through my husband presenting papers, and I was able to visit India many times together with him. And we networked very well with people from various countries, so much so that to date we have a good, strong network of people from the Indian and more especially from Chennai, people that have moved abroad but still come there to showcase that they still have the mother tongue knowledge, and they want to uh, showcase it so that people throughout must know that your mother tongue language is of uttermost importance. And if you don't have a cultural root or a language, then a nation will be falling apart. With publishing and library conferences, it developed a good interest, that so much so that to date we still get in touch with digital library and doing work across. With those words, I want to say to all of you in the panel and to the viewers that once you've set foot in India, you'd always have a thirst to go back. And to date, I'm still thirsty to go back to India. With that, I conclude. Vanakkam and Namaste. Thank you for affording me this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Chinnappan, for sharing your journey with us. And from what you've said to us, we now have that thirst to want to go to India to experience everything that you've mentioned. And with that, we are going to move on to our screening of our video on Incredible India. Thank you for that inspiring video, which still makes us want to travel to India even more. Our second guest and speaker is a customer consultant at Standard Bank. She has the ability to match her clients' needs to what the company has to offer. She is a people's person and is able to build rapport with people from all walks of life. Please welcome Ms.Indira Ramkhelawan to enlighten us on her journeys in India. Mrs. Ramkhelawan, over to you.
Namaskar, everybody. Okay, thank you to the Indian Cultural Center for inviting me to share my experience on India, a feeling. And yes, what a feeling indeed to be able to travel to our motherland. Where do I begin? My first visit to India was exactly 34 years ago in February 1988, as my husband, Rajan Ramkhelawan, and I chose India as our honeymoon destination. We both had never traveled before. We'd never been overseas, and we were inexperienced travelers. And when my Jiju, Dr. Raj Ramkisoon, came to my Haldi ceremony and he heard that I was leaving to India a week after my bidai, he took it upon himself to teach me and tell me about the ins and outs of India and what to do and what not to do, as he was studying in India to become a doctor. The first experience in India was enough for me to want to go back again and again and again. And having said that, as Simpiweji mentioned, I have been to India 28 times. And I don't know what is it that keeps wanting me to go back for more. Our first trip, we visited Mumbai, Delhi, Vrindavan, Mathura, Srinagar, Varanasi, and Goa. My first experience as our plane touched down at Sahar International Airport, as it was called in 1988, was surreal. Our flight landed at night, and just looking at the lights at Queen's Necklace was overwhelming. Mumbai was called Bombay at that time. And as we disembarked from the aircraft, as I set foot on the ground, I suddenly felt a sudden urge to touch the ground, which I did, as though it was a mark of respect to this great country that I have been longing to visit. I was fortunate to be able to do that on the runway, as these days you walk straight through the skywalk and you're into the terminal building. So you never ever get to touch the ground as you disembark. I love the hustle and bustle, as well as the shopping in Mumbai. Not forgetting the pani puris, etc. in Juhu. My favorite spot in Mumbai is at the Bombay Gateway, right opposite the iconic Taj Hotel. I love feeding the birds, visiting the Shamiana restaurant at the Taj, as well as the Nalanda bookshop, and taking the ferry to Elephanta Caves. My trips to Mumbai is never complete without a visit to Kala Ghoda Rhythm House, where I purchase collector's items of CDs and movies. And more commonly, it's owned by the Dada Muni family, that is the Ashok Kumar family. But unfortunately, that shop has now shut its doors. I attended a musical concert at the Leela Hotel. We were on a flight to Delhi, but prior to our flight, we came to know that there was a concert at the Leela Kempinski Hotel. So my husband and I had our taxi driver, our baggage was in the taxi, and we attended the concert. And the concert was a Pankaj Udas night. We sat on the floor on white sheets and cushions, as that's how the ambience was. It was a very intimate, close-knit concert. And as I sat on the floor, I didn't have any pen and paper. So I wrote on a serviette to Pankaj Udasji that we were a honeymooning couple from South Africa, and I'd love for you to play me the song Chandi Jaisa, to which he obliged. And we have photographs with him as well. We requested the song Chandi Jaisa Rang, and he played that for me. We arrived from Bombay, and then we went to Delhi on the Rajdhani Express. And what an experience that was. It's an overnight train. You leave in the evening, and by morning, you're in Delhi. We toured Delhi, visited the Monument of Love, that is the Taj Mahal and Jantar Mantar, as well as the home of Indira Gandhi. At this point, I must mention that my late dad named me after Indira Gandhi. And that visit has etched something in my mind that I will never forget for the rest of my life when we visit her home. It was a saying that said, I cannot imagine anyone being an Indian and not being proud of it. We thereafter proceeded to Srinagar. In February, Delhi was warm. So we left on our Indian Airlines flight. Temperature was -degrees, but obviously it didn't bother me because I've never experienced -degrees temperature. So I didn't even know what it was going to be like. We got off the flight and it was -degree. We had to stop at a shop, KPC Shawls, where I purchased a Kashmiri shawl because I hadn't carried any warm clothes with me. It was too cold for me to even remember our flight, the temperature, or the day we landed there. Nevertheless, we reached our houseboat on Dal Lake, And the experience to go on the shikara to our houseboat was like something out of a movie. We stayed on the houseboat and it was beautifully and exquisitely furnished as it was a deluxe houseboat on Dal Lake. And the rest of the lake was actually frozen and there was like bits of snow everywhere. The next day, we hired some warm clothes from the service provider that we had hired the 2 ponies from. And we decided to brave the cold and brave the snow and ride up to Gulmarg Mountains, where everything looked picture perfect. We rode up and it was snowing lightly at the time when we left. We were approximately just under 10 minutes of reaching the top of the mountains, and the snowfall got heavier and the ponies started to like slip and skid because of some of it were melting. And apart from that, I must be honest and tell you, I was actually frozen. My hands were frozen. I couldn't move my hands. My lips were like my teeth were chattering. So we decided, okay, that was enough. Even though the pine trees looked so beautiful, tinged with the snow, we decided to call it a day and we got back. Considering the snowfall was too heavy and being it my first experience with snow, we thought it best because we didn't want to go there and take the chance of getting ill because there was so much to do thereafter. From Srinagar, we visited Varanasi and was awestruck at the beauty of the Ganges River. My visit to Kashi Vishwanath was also a memorable experience. From Varanasi, we came back to Bombay and visited Goa by coach, spent a few days back in Bombay, and departed back to South Africa. But on the night of our departure, as we sat at the Kumaria Presidency restaurant at the airport, sipping my strawberry milkshake, I knew that this love affair with India was just the beginning of many more trips to come. We got back to South Africa and settled down adjusting to our new married life. And 2 years later, in 1990, I was expecting my first baby. The travel bug hit me, and in March, we visited India again, this time visiting South India, Madras, which is now called Chennai, and was Bangalore, Tirupati, Hyderabad, and Mysore. We returned to South Africa, and 4 months later, my son was born. I embraced motherhood and did not travel for the next 2 years. Then in March 1993, we decided to travel back to Mumbai and back to India because there was so much more to do. Unfortunately, 2 weeks before our trip, on the 13th of March 1993, as you all know, Black Friday happened. And that deeply saddened me. This incident was really a very sad incident, but determined as we were, we continued on our trip as our airfares were done, our tickets were issued, our injections were done. So we braved it and we made the trip. My son, a toddler that just a little over 2 years old, was fascinated by the Ganges. And as little as he was, for some reason, insisted that he wants to pray. So getting a pujari was quick and easy, as well as it hardly cost us anything on the banks of the Ganges. We went in a boat in the middle of the beautiful Ganga and offered puja. We always made a trip to Delhi. As from Delhi, we did our tours to Rishikesh, Haridwar, etc. I thought it would be difficult traveling with a toddler, but it actually was not, as my son was easygoing and not a bother at all, and hence I braved the situation. And 2 years later, my husband, my son, and my second baby that was just 12 months old, we celebrated his birthday party on the Saturday, and on the Monday, we flew back to India. At this point, that was my 4th trip to India. And as you know, friends and family said to us, why do you want to keep going back to India? There's so many other countries, there's so many other beautiful countries that you can visit. So I said to them, there is so much to see and so much to do in India. And even after visiting 28 times at this stage, I still feel there is so much more that I have to still cover in India. On this trip, we went to North India, and as on every other trip, we try to cover different places and different areas and different states. On this trip, we visited Jaipur, and our experience at Chowkidani was beautiful, as you get to experience Rajasthani culture, food, and tradition. You also get to wear traditional colorful Rajasthani attire, and you are able to take out photographs. We visited Varanasi again and again on this trip one evening. As we were walking through the Vishwanath Gully, I saw a weaver weaving a black Banaras sari. Obviously, the Banaras saris, Banaras is a more commercial name for Varanasi because the saris do come from there. And for some reason, black Banaras saris are not easy to acquire. I approached the weaver to purchase the sari, and he advised me that it would take a day or two for it to be ready, as he had to still complete the sari and do polishing on the sari. But he tried his best to complete weaving, and I was lucky enough. I was able to buy the sari, and it is one of my prized possessions. By now, I started to travel to India every year, as my sons had also become avid travelers, just like my husband and I. So we visited many intriguing places. You all are probably wondering as to why so many trips to Varanasi. Well, I felt a sudden bond to Varanasi as my brother studied at Banaras Hindu University, and he lived in Varanasi in Asi Ghat along the banks of the Ganges River. He married my bhabi that was from the beautiful mountainous state of Sikkim. And my two nieces were born in Varanasi. And one of the little girls' name was Kashika, meaning from Kashi, which is a religious name for Varanasi. But by the time we started traveling to India, my brother and his family had already returned to South Africa. To tell you everything about my India experience would take a very long time, so I will just mention the highlights. My family and I visited Katra as we wanted to visit the Vaishno Devi Mandir for 3 consecutive years, which we did. And one of the trips, my dad, that was 75 years old, accompanied us to Vaishno Devi, whereby we walked up 13.5 kilometers in the rain to reach the Bhavan. On the way, we stopped and ate as the smell of the garma garma puris, cooked in Shuddh Desi ghee, and the rajma and the jalebis frying was too overwhelming for us to give it a miss. So we stopped and we had tasted that, and it was really divine. After visiting Varanasi, we visited other states like Chandigarh, Mussoorie, Shimla, Dharamshala, Dalhousie, and the Mussoorie Falls. We toured India, experiencing the different modes of transport, planes, trains, road trips, as well as the catamaran, the Damania from Bombay to Goa, which was a lovely, very nice experience. On every trip to India, my children were in primary school and they accompanied us. But by now, we changed our holiday month from March to July, as we did not want to disrupt their schooling. And they were also keen to join us on these trips. We alternated and took both my mom-in-law and my father-in-law to experience India as well. You can call me somewhat of a self-proclaimed ambassador, but yes, I promoted India all the way, and I feel it's nice for other people to go there and experience it for yourself, because as much as somebody can tell you, you're not going to know what it's like until you experience it for yourself. On one of our trips, we took a road trip driving along the Vyas River, which is a massive, very, very long river. And we drove to Kulu and Manali. Manali was absolutely beautiful, and it was snowing. We lived in a beautiful cottage called Chandramukhi Cottage. And when we looked out the window, all you could see was snow-capped mountains, an absolutely beautiful sight. And then from Manali, we visited a place called Little Switzerland in Manali, where you can go there and it snows and you can hire your clothing and you can do skiing. So it's really, really a little Switzerland. And if you see the pictures, you will think it's really Switzerland. That's how beautiful it is. And that's the amount and depth of snow that they had at Little Switzerland. And I must mention that picture looked like a postcard. Can you imagine all these greenery, and then it's covered, kissed with snow? An absolutely beautiful sight to hold. In 2011, we were invited to our friend's wedding in Rohtak, and that suited us fine. And we accepted the invite and went to India. And we arrived in Mumbai a few days before the 2011 World Cup. At the same time, the Sri Lankan team arrived and the finals was held at Wankhede Stadium. We did manage to see and take our pics with some of the players, which was a lovely experience. When we were in Mumbai on the 1st of April 2011, and that was the night, I cannot even tell you about the ambience, as India lifted the cup to victory after 1983 on home ground. The celebrations, the partying went on the street, and we were in Colaba, which is very close, like less than like 3 minutes walk from the Taj Hotel, and that's where the players were housed. That celebration went on and on and on till the wee hours of the morning. So in saying that, I have aspirations to visit India towards the latter end of 2023, as the World Cup is held in India again. So hopefully, with all the virus and at bay, I will be able to make that trip. The wedding that we attended was in an area called Rohtak. It's like 2 hours drive away from Delhi. And the function, we were invited to the ring ceremony at Harjai Gardens, as well as the Mendi, and then the wedding itself was at Khushbu Gardens. And what a beautiful ambiance it was. It was like a picture out of a fairy tale. And the venue looked like a carnival, complete with candy floss stalls, ice cream stalls, snacks for the children, tandoori paneer for whoever wanted to indulge in snacks before the main meal. And it was an absolutely lovely wedding, as our friend is a Punjabi, and the Punjabis do know how to party. So that was really, really lovely, and we enjoyed that day as well. In 2011, that was my last trip with my sons, as they were in high school and got busy with their studies. But my husband and I continued to visit India, and we continued going every year. Our last trip to India was in 2019. That was pre-COVID. And we haven't been to India since, as you all know what's been happening in the last 2 years. And I can hardly wait to travel again. And hopefully all is well, and we can continue visiting incredible India. As there is so much more I want to do, like visit Darjeeling, Leh, Ladakh, Kerala, Sikkim, Guwahati, Nainital, Nepal, Shillong, Kathmandu, Rameshwaram, and Jagannath Puri, as my maiden surname is Jagannath. I'll be failing in my duty if I don't mention my visit to Amritsar, where we went to the Gurudwara. After the Gurudwara visit, it was absolutely beautiful, so divine. The next day, being patriotic as I am, we went to the Wagah border. And that is an experience you've just got to experience, the change of guards at Wagah border. It happens twice a day. Another highlight is my guru is from Lucknow. So he has a Hanuman Mandir in Patna, in a little village called Siwan. And we attend his puja. Normally that's held in February. So the one year we entered the mandir and we visited. And our Swamiji's brothers were in charge of the temple. When they heard my children do the bhajans for Swamiji, because my eldest son, Raval, he plays the harmonium and he's a vocalist. He has featured on one of the programs here as well. And my second son, Akshay, he plays the tabla, percussion, nal, and all percussion instruments. When the villagers heard that my children play music, the mandir, that area is so poor, they didn't even have musical instruments, but they have such an awesome big heart that some of the villagers went to their homes and brought their personal musical instruments, and the music was broadcast over the PA system because it's a small mandir, and whoever couldn't fit into the mandir could hear the bhajans going on. At the end of that evening, you know, as we all know, the highest gift you can get is scriptures. And the Hanuman Mandir in Siwan is so, I would say so poor, because they have a very rich heart. If I tell you, they got to the altar as they didn't have anything to give the children, which we didn't want because my children play music. They normally do satsangs and free. It's for the love of music. My Swamiji's brother went to the altar and he gifted us their traditional family Bhagavad Gita. And that is something priceless. It's absolutely priceless to be gifted the scriptures. So that, in a nutshell, is my experiences in India. I could actually go on talking about it because there's so much, and I just feel I've just scratched the surface. And hopefully soon I'll be able to travel. And once I'm able to travel, I'll be back in India in a heartbeat. Thank you. Namaste to everyone for giving me this opportunity of sharing my experiences.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Ramkhelawan. That was such a beautiful depiction of India and the many places within India. And I do hope that your next trip comes soon as well. With that, I'm going to hand over to Mr. Simpiwe Mchunu from the Consulate General of India to render us with the vote of thanks. Mr. Mchunu?
Namaskar and greetings to all of you. On behalf of Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center at the Consulate General of India in Durban, it gives me a great pleasure to deliver a vote of thanks on our 20th episode of the program, India A Feeling. Allow me to thank our online guest. We had Mrs. Kogie Chinnappan, a retired educator, and Ms.Indira Ramkhelawan, who narrated their journeys in India, with their experiences that they shared with us this evening, and I can see that they are still cherishing those moments that took place in India. And as both said, they are still looking forward to visit India again. So to these two wonderful ladies, thank you very much for sharing such wonderful experiences with us this evening. To Director of the Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center, Dr. Chaitanya Prakash Yogi, Mr. Piyush Kandelwal, Ms. Nileka G, who is our Program Director, Danyavat, for being with us this evening. To our online participants, allow me to say thank you very much for being with us this evening. For more information on cultural activities organized by Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center in Durban, please visit ICCR in Durban Facebook page. Once again, to our wonderful, wonderful online guests, Ms.Indira Ramkhelawan and Mrs. Kogie Chinnappan, thank you to both of you. Other than that, have a wonderful evening. Namaskar.